This Ditra, made by Schluter, it's an uncoupling membrane, and what this does is you cement this with this felt part onto the plywood with a polymer modified thin set. I'm going to be using, in this case, 253 Latticrete gold, and the trowel I'm going to be using is this one here. It's 11/64 by 11/64 square notch trowel, and this is actually a Schluter Ditra trowel. This is what Schluter recommends to install membrane. And when you install a tile on this membrane, you use an unmodified thin set. And the reason you do that is because the tile, when it's installed on this, the thin set doesn't actually adhere to this plastic. It gets locked in to these waffles here, which have like a dovetail. See if you can see it somewhere here. Can't really see it, but it's like a dovetail in here. So what happens is when the thin set cures, it gets locked into these waffles. And because there's these ridges behind here, what that does is it uncouples the floor from the tile floor from the subfloor. So if there's any movement in the plywood or whatever, lateral movement, it will not transfer through the Ditra to the tile because of these voids. The Ditra can deform and not transfer the the movement to the tile. That's how that works. And it's a very good system, and I've used it for years and years and years, and I've never had a problem with it. Just want to make sure when you put this down that you use a good quality polymer modified thin set to adhere the Ditra to the subfloor. These comes in, this was what's left over from 150 foot rolls. They come in 50 foot rolls, they come in 150 foot rolls, and they come in 340 or 330 foot rolls. So that's what I'm going to do now. So this is actually very easy to install. All you need to cut in, a utility knife, and that's about it. So I'm going to start installing this. Now these are about 40 inches wide. So that's 40 inches right there. That's that joint. So I don't want, from the top to this joint is 40 inches. So I don't want this seam to fall right on that joint. So going from the door here to here, 40 inches is about here. That's good. So, I'm probably just going to do it this way here. that's it. So there's to it to have it in. So I mixed up my thin set. It's a little looser than you would normally use it for installing tile. Just a little bit looser. Still has to be able to hold the notch, but you don't want it to be stiff. So this is a polymer modified thin set. It's Latticrete 253 gold, and that is suitable for installing the Ditra on the plywood. And that's what I'm going to do now. Now the first step is I'm going to roll it back a little bit. I'm going to dampen the plywood, and the reason you dampen the plywood is so that the plywood doesn't suck the moisture right out of the thin set, weakening the bond and the strength of the thin set. So that's the procedure. Then I'm going to use a wooden trowel to smooth the Ditra into the thin set. So that's what I'm going to do now. Roll this back about halfway, dampen the plywood. This damp, you don't really leave any standing water, just so it doesn't suck the moisture out of the thin set. And then use the back side of the trowel the flat side to key the thin set into the plywood. And this actually does make a difference. Your wooden trowel. Fold it right into that inset. And once you've done that, gonna check to make sure that you got good coverage, and that's what you want. Okay, so that is that. The Ditra is installed. Ready for tile. If you want, you can start laying tile right away, or you can just do it the next day. And then on top of this, we're going to be using an unmodified thin set. Okay, so I'm laying out this tile. Now this is going to be staggered. These are 6-inch by 24-inch plank tile, and I laid it out. So I'm going to start with a full piece over here, and that gives me practically maybe, I don't know, an inch less than a full piece over here. And that's good because full piece over here, that's good. The toilet's going to be over here. There's going to be a vanity here, so much of this wall is not going to be seen, or it's going to be hidden from view. So even if this didn't work out to be almost a full tile, say it was like even a third of a tile or like a 3-inch piece, it would have been all right, because you're really not going to see this area over here. And now I got a straight edge on the floor here, and that's parallel. This here is parallel to this wall, and it is square to the threshold. This threshold is actually out of square with the with this wall here, but it's square. But this is square with that threshold is square with this wall, and the tub. So I didn't want to compromise the whole bathroom to gain that little spot there, and make this perfectly straight in the gym. Sometimes you have to make compromises. So now I'm going to lay it out from the tub to the threshold and see what I get. Okay, so I've laid it out from the tub to the wall. Now this is pretty easy because it's just a square room, so there's really not much to it. And because if I were to start with a full tile here, this is on a 1/3 running bond. Now, if I started with a full tile here, that would leave me with an inch piece over here. So I started with a 4-inch piece here, and that leaves me with maybe like a 5-inch piece on this side, the smallest piece. So, and it's 1/3 running bond. And that's how I'm going to do this. Now the reason you do these plank tiles at a 1/3 running bond is because these are so long that the tiles are actually curved. And when you try and stagger them halfway, what happens is if you try and go halfway like this, you get lippage between the tiles. Now these got like curved, they're not square edges, so it doesn't show up as much. And these are pretty flat, but some tiles can be more warped than others, even in the same tile. And then if you try and put these at a half running bond, you can get lippage, which is one tile sticking up a little higher than the other, like that. So to eliminate that, you go to 1/3, and this is not this is a recommendation by the industry. It's not something that I'm making up. So usually you go put these at 1/3 running bond and not half. If the tiles are flat and they're not really bad, because some are worse than others. Others are pretty flat. Like natural stone usually is flat, so you can do them half, half running bond or brick pattern. But these manufactured tiles, many of them have a curve to them which doesn't allow to do that. So to minimize the lippage, you put them at a 1/3 running bond, and that's what I'm going to be doing here. Okay, now this is how I got the tile laid out. So to cut these, you can simply measure them and then mark on the tile, or you can do it this way. one tile on top of the other tile, and you leave an 1/8 of an inch grout line, because that's what my grout line is. So you leave an 1/8 of an inch, just extend an 1/8 of an inch further than the bottom tile. Same on this one. And same on this one. And then you get a full tile, put it up against the tub, mark it, mark it, mark it. Now these will be exactly the dimension it's got to fit in there. So I'm going to cut this now. Fit there. There. And that tile will fit there. No measuring whatsoever. So now I gotta mark this hole for the toilet flange. So the easiest way to do it is get an extension ring. I keep this in my tool pocket and line it up exactly, this inside hole exactly with the closet flange, the pipe. And then I'm gonna mark this here like this. Gives me that mark. I'm gonna put this one back in place. And it goes, line this up with this pencil line that I put on there, and then mark it like that. Now I gotta make it, I'll make a 3/8 of an inch smaller. Doesn't have to be perfect because it's going to get covered by the toilet flange. And I'm going to cut that out there. And then when we put the toilet flange on, it'll sit on top of the tile, and there'll be room to put the screws in without having to go through the tile. I'm going to cut this now on the west side. So I cut those. I'll put them in place. And that is that. I'm going to cut this whole row in dry fit, and just because it's probably easier that way. And then this will just cut, the other part I'll just cut as I go along. So same deal on this one here, to mark this one. Leave an 1/8 inch gap here, 1/8 inch gap here. You can actually leave a little more because I leave a little bit of a gap over here. So I'm gonna leave like 3/16 over here. You get another tile. And top like that. That off, and then that'll be the piece for there. I transferred this line from here to here, this tile, from here to here, because this is a third, 2/3, 1/3, the stagger, right? So I use this square to transfer this line from here to here. And I put this tile that goes there, like that. Tile, an 1/8 inch Grout line here. So these are all in place here where they belong. Put this on here, 1/8 inch. Leave an 1/8 inch there. Another piece of tile. Mark that there. Mark that there. I'm going to put this over here. I can cut that piece first. So I cut that little piece off there. Put this over here. 1/8 inch gap over here. Full tile. Over here. Full tile. Now I'm going to cut that on the wet saw. I'm going to cut this off, and that'll fit exactly in there. So, cut on the wet saw. See if it fits. And that's that. I'm going to cut the rest of this in. I'm going to number them. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, cut the rest of those in, and then we'll cement them down. Okay, this is the trowel I'm using. It's a 1/2 inch square notch trowel, and this is a thin set. It's an unmodified thin set. There's no latex in this thin set, and it's a Tech uncoupling membrane thin set. Specifically made for Ditra. You can get Ditra set if you can find it. I actually like this better. So the first thing you do is use the back side of the trowel and fill all the waffles. Okay, once they got it filled, time to gauge the inset. Now you want to have the lines going all in one direction. You got the thin set gauged out. Okay, so we've got the thin set on the Ditra. Now it's time to put down some tile. So for these tiles here, always gonna back butter them. I got these tiles numbered. That's number 1. Make sure you push them in. Always have a bucket of water handy. And I like to use a hook knife to take the inside out between the joints. Back buttering really is not optional. You should do it every time. And just so you can see, it's 100% coverage. Okay, so that's it. That's the floor. That's the tub. All done. Only thing left is caulk and grout. I set this tile yesterday, and now it's time to grout. You want to clean off the floor, get all the spaces out, etc., etc. Then you mix your grout according to the directions on the package of grout that you bought. There are a lot of different manufacturers for grout. They're basically all the same. A lot of the grouts, polymer grouts, you can add an additive like Boost to make it very stain resistant. Some of them you can't do that, so you just want to make sure that you mix the grout according to the directions on the package. But most of the time you add the water to the bucket or the liquid that you're using. You mix it in to a like peanut butter or type consistency, and then you let it sit for like 10 minutes or so, and then you mix it again, and what that does, it activates all the components of the grout so that you get the proper consistency and coloring of the grout. So once the grout is ready, you use a rubber float, and make sure you wear gloves when you grout, because they can really dry out your hands if you don't. So when you grout, you use the rubber float on a very low angle to push the grout into the joints. It's almost going to be flat to the tile, and you go over the grout lines multiple times. Then once you've got an area spread, then you turn the grout on a very high angle and use it like a squeegee almost to clean off all the excess grout. I actually have another video that explains this in much more detail, if you want to go look at that, but it's basically how you do it. So you spread an area of the floor, and then once you've got that done, you have to go back and wash it. So once you have an area of the floor grouted, it's going to be time to wash. So you need to have a bucket of clean water and a grouting sponge. And you want to, when you're doing this, you want to make sure that you wear gloves, because the grout is very caustic and it can really dry out your hand. So I always wear gloves when I'm doing this. And then you get your grout sponge and you wring it out as much as possible. And what you're going to do initially is work the grout lines. You're not going to worry too much about getting the tile clean. You just mainly want to work on the grout lines to smooth them out and shape them. And that's why you don't use a lot of water on the when you're washing it, because too much water is going to fade the color in the grout. It's going to wash it out. So you want to keep the when you take your sponge out of the bucket, you want to wring it out fairly well. So the first step, and like I said, is to work the grout lines. You're not really worrying about getting the tile clean. And then after you've done that, follows the next part of the grouting process, the cleaning process. So once you've got an area of the floor, grouted floor, cleaned up, the way you get it so you get as much of the grout residue off as possible is you rinse out your sponge, you wring it out as much as possible, then you put the sponge on the tile and you pull it in one direction. Don't go back and forth, just pull in one direction. Then you flip it over, use the other side of the sponge, rinse it out, and then again pull the sponge in one direction, and then flip it over another direction, etc., etc. Don't want to go back and forth. I actually have another video which explains this in much more detail if you want to take a look at that one. But basically, you don't want to go back and forth when this final part of the rinsing is concerned, because what you do is when you go in the one direction with the clean side of the sponge and then you go back again, you just put the grout residue that you took off in the initial swipe back on when you go backwards. So sponge on the tile, pull in one direction, and then flip it over, pull in the other direction, and then rinse it off. And then you let the tile sit, haze over. You don't wait till the next day. You let the tile just haze over so that the water on the surface of the tile is dry. And then you do the same process with another clean bucket of water, sponge, pull in one direction, lift, flip over, pull, on again with the other side of the sponge, and then you let it dry, and it should be pretty clean. And that's basically how you install this kind of tile. All is said and done, this should be your end product. And this is the tub area that I did in this bathroom. It's just a 3x6 Carrera marble tile and a subway pattern with a window framed in marble and a recessed niche. So that's basically how you install a 6x12 24-inch plank tile. I'm going to try and give you some tips on how to grout a tile floor. I've got a lot of other videos that you can watch on other specifics on installing tile, but in this one I'm going to just try and give you an idea of how I find it the easiest way to grout a tile floor. This floor in particular is a 12-inch by 24-inch wood look plank tile, and it has an 1/8 of an inch grout line, and I'm using sanded grout. And I'm going to give you some tips on how to go about grouting a tile floor. Mix your grout according to the directions on the package that you buy. There are a lot of different manufacturers for grout. More or less you mix them all the same way, but it's best to follow the directions on the package of the grout. So let's get to the first. So the first thing you have to know is you got to use a rubber grout floor, and when you're trying to push the grout into the joints, you want to keep the grout at a very low angle, like I'm showing you here, at a very, very low angle. And then when you've got the grout joints filled, you want to put it at a very high angle, and this will clean off almost all the grout off the tile, leaving very little on the tile, and leaving the joints full. So low angle to fill the joints, and then a very high angle to get the excess off. Here it is with some actual grout, and you're going to see that when you fill the joints, and then you go over it with a very high angle. The tile comes very clean. I mean, you practically no grout left behind when you do it this way. So just remember to fill the joints, you go at a very low angle like this, and you use quite a bit of grout on the floor. Don't be skimpy with the grout. You want to get a good amount, and you fill the grout lines, go over the grout lines multiple times at this very low angle, and you don't want to go parallel with the grout lines. You want to go across the grout lines on an angle. And see how when you put the float at a very high angle, it practically takes off all the excess grout and just leaves the grout lines thick. So this is how I do it. So just try it and see how it works. So now you've grouted a section of the floor. It's time to wash it off. Now the way I do it is I get you need some clean water. You get a nice grouting sponge, and when you put it on the floor, you're going to wring it out as tight as you can, and then you're just going to work the grout lines. You're not worrying about getting the tile clean. You just want to try and smooth off the grout lines and get them nice. I'm not pressing very hard here, and I'm just working on the grout lines. Now once you've done that, you want to rinse off the sponge, and then you're going to pull the sponge in one direction. See how that gets almost all the haze off? So you rinse the sponge off, you pull it in one direction, and that practically gets almost everything off. Then you flip the sponge over and you do the same thing with the other side of the sponge. You don't want to go back and forth. If you go back and forth, you're going to pull it off, the grout haze off by going in one direction, and then when you go back the other way, you're going to be putting it back on because all that grout is on the sponge. So just work your joints, get them how you want them, rinse off your sponge, put it on the tile, with a decent amount of pressure, and then pull in one direction. Flip the sponge over, same thing, pull in one direction. Here it is again. This time I sped it up so you can see a little bit of a large area. So low angle, fill the grout lines, and then high angle, clean the grout off. Low angle, fill the grout lines, high angle, cleans it off. And you see how much that really gets it off? And then you go back and you're going to have to wash it. So work the joints. Not worrying about getting the tile clean right now. You just work on the joints. And once you got the way you want it, one swipe in one direction, flip it over on the other side of the sponge, same thing, and just keep on going like that until it's all clean and you got the whole floor grouted. See how clean that comes off? You're going to fill in any joints that you may have missed, but that's basically the whole thing. Floor, and you've done your first initial wash, and then you're going to let it dry so it completely hazes over. You're not going to let it dry overnight. You're just going to let it dry till it hazes over, and this is what you should have. This is just with the initial first wash. There's really not a lot of haze on here, just a little bit here and there, and once it's at this point, it could be 15 minutes, it could be an hour and a half. It all depends on the humidity in the air, etc., etc. So you're just going to wait to get to this point, and then you're going to do the second wash. And the second wash is basically the same as the first wash, except you're not going to be working no grout lines. You're just going to get a clean bucket of water, and you're going to put the sponge on the floor with some pretty good pressure, and you're not going to try and dig out any grout lines. You're just going to, good pressure on the floor, pull the sponge in one direction, just like that. Flip it over, same side on the other side of the sponge, and that's it. Now you're going to rinse the sponge off, you get it clean, and do the same thing. And when you do this, your floor is going to be completely clean. There's going to be practically nothing left on the tile. If there is, when it dries, you can just buff it off with a rag. And so just keep on going, doing this till you wash the whole floor. Sped up. Rinse your sponge, put it on the floor, pull in one direction, flip it over, the other side of the sponge, pull in one direction, and you do the whole floor like that. Do not go back and forth. If you go back and forth, you're just making your life harder by taking the grout haze off in the first wipe and then putting it back on when you go the other way. When you're all done, you should have something like this. And when this dries, if there's any haze left on the floor, you can just buff it off with a rag and the floor will be perfectly clean.